I'm full. You have to aerate your monster.
Swill. Ready?
Yep. What's up, nerds? Welcome back to the channel. So, you want to buy a kayak?
I would love to buy a kayak.
Too bad.
Darn.
Just kidding. What are 5 things that you would need to consider when picking up a kayak or picking out a kayak realistically?
The most important 5 things. There's always more things you could think about.
Of course.
But without doing the math on these like 5 things, you'll be making an incomplete decision.
You'll be
with not
upset.
the right information.
So, if you're looking into either a new kayak or you're getting your first kayak, this could be a helpful video for you. So let's get right into those 5 things. Number 1, the most obvious one.
It's money, bro.
It's the budget. So when considering budget, keep in mind too, you could probably get these things used, and we'll talk about that at the end. For now, let's consider we're just looking at new kayaks. So when you're considering your budget, what are some of the things that we think about?
Well, first of all, it's just what is the top end of your budget, and then sort of what maybe is, I don't want to buy anything cheaper than this. So,
right.
And you can do some Googling and kind of like say, top 5, you know, fishing kayaks.
Under
right?
1,000, under 2,000, under 3,000. You can do all that.
And look at the differences between them. You're going to see some really stark differences. You're also going to see some marketing BS that says like...
Keep that in mind, please, because there are going to be made up lists. Look at where the list
just
is
like
coming
a car.
from.
Oh, it comes with Windows. Hooray!
Yeah, there are going to be these lists where they're very obviously like a paid marketing blog where it says like top 10, top 5, whatever, but they only feature like 2 brands or they only feature
the same
no-name
3
brands
that everybody knows as well.
Yeah.
But I say like, so look at those, and when you're looking at a company's website, like when you're looking at Pelican, it's going to be like tracks true. In some cases it does, in some cases the tracking on a cheaper kayak, it's usually not.
Prove it.
It's not usually going to compare to the tracking of like a well-established company that's been making kayaks and canoes for like a really long time. So
another great resource is go on YouTube and just make sure that that YouTube creator isn't sponsored by that brand, and then you can potentially trust whatever review they're providing you, even if they got it for free, as long as they like call that out, are not sponsored by that company.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, take it with a grain of salt.
High end of your budget. The other thing to consider with both high end and low end is you gotta account for some buffer, because there's some things that you're going to have to buy after the fact. One of them is a paddle. Even if you're buying a pedal or a motorized kayak, you're gonna need a paddle. What happens when the drive breaks, when you get stuck, when something happens, the battery dies, whatever it is, having a paddle is an emergency situation. You're gonna have to have that. Number 2 is gonna be a PFD.
Technically number 1's a PFD.
Sure, number 1 and 1A, paddle and PFD. PFDs, they're gonna be anywhere from 50 to like 150 bucks, somewhere in that range.
Depending on what you want out of it. We did
100%.
a PFD video recently. You can go check that out as well if you want some ideas there.
Paddles are gonna be anywhere from, again, around 50 bucks to up to like 300 or 400 easily, and you can get well over that, but just like general range is somewhere in there. Yeah. So I think accounting for like 250 bucks, 200 bucks wiggle room just for those 2 pieces of equipment is a requirement.
Also, add that to your buffer.
Also transportation. So if you're putting this in the back of the truck, you're gonna want some straps. If you need a trailer because of weight, your physical mobility and your strength and all that, or if you get a heavy kayak, you may have to trailer it, or if that's just what you want, or if it's a car topper, you're gonna need some kind of straps and pads and all that to make that work.
A rack, wheels on the kayak itself, a cart for the kayak, storage for the kayak. There's a lot to consider when you're talking about budget, so just be aware of that and consider all of it.
What's the top end of your budget? Subtract whatever you need for things other than just the kayak. That's your kayak budget. So if your budget's $5,000, I'm making up a number. Your budget's $5,000. You want to have electronics. You want to have like a trailer and a bunch of other stuff. Your budget is actually like $3,000 or $2,000 for the kayak itself. So just think about that. Number 2, I think, is probably where people are gonna either know exactly what they want or have no idea, and that's whether or not you want to get a paddle kayak, a pedal kayak, a motor kayak, a skiff, or an inflatable, right? There's a long list. But what type? Because that is going to pigeonhole you into the type of accessories you're gonna need and the cost of your kayak. If you get let's just talk about each one real quick. If you get a paddle kayak, you're gonna need a lot less. You're talking about a lighter boat, you're talking about less accessories typically. And because the trade is work and speed and efficiency. Enter the pedal kayak. So with a pedal kayak, you get a huge increase in speed, a huge increase of efficiency. You also get a huge increase in weight and cost because the boats are a little bit bigger, the boats are a little bit more expensive because you have to drive in there, and they weigh more just because of all the things I just talked about. So that may be one where now I can no longer car top it, or maybe I can't, I have to have a trailer because it's that big, or I'm gonna so overload it with accessories, I still need a trailer. So that's where pedal kayaks come in. Then
you're going to see weight capacity in there as well. So
Good point.
when we talk about how you can load it, overload it, etc., you need to look at the weight capacity and what the base weight of that kayak is as well. I would say for like your own mobility purposes, an individual with less mobility is going to have a tough time with a big heavy tank. Like what was the Jackson Nar was one of the heaviest kayaks we've seen, 140 pounds.
146 pounds.
Dry.
That's freaking a lot.
That's pretty heavy. So it's something to keep in mind. Like you have to be mobile enough to cart that thing around, right? And then the weight capacity that the kayak can take while being still safe to float.
The NAR was like 450. The Hobie Pro Angler is 5 or 550, and that's kind of the general range. 400 to 550. There are some that go 650. There are some that go 400, but
there's some that go way under. The Sun Dolphin, I believe, is 250. So I mean, I can barely be in a Sun Dolphin,
and that's a sit inside. So that's like the lowest end in terms of cost is going to be a sit inside paddle. The highest end in terms of cost is going to be a kayak that requires or you intend to put a motor on. A motor is going to run you anywhere from like $1,500 on the very low end to like $3,000 to $4,000 or even $5,000 by the time you get all the mounting brackets and all the other accessories for it. So that's a huge range. Most of them are going to be in the $3,000 to $4,000 range. That's like an average for like a full size 1.5 to 3 horsepower motor.
And we will do many videos on motors this year, so you'll see hopefully some different examples, but you've got your rear mount, you've got your bow mount, you've got your through hull. There's all sorts of different ways that you can rig that up. You can also just transom mount right behind the seat. They make a lot of different brackets, a bunch of different companies out there do. So a lot of different things like that you can consider. And that would be generally, not to say that you have to, but in general, it's like almost required. Sit on top paddle kayak.
So those motorized kayaks are going to be even heavier than a lot of the pedal kayaks because the propulsion is just way heavier. Most people are going to struggle between should I get a pedal or a paddle, or should I get a pedal or a motor? That's probably
paddle motor.
Yeah, so I think those are your three. You got to figure that out, and that right there is going to be the biggest thing that impacts your cost. Paddles are going to be mostly under $2,000. Pedals are going to be mostly under $4,000, and then something with a motor is going to be probably under $7,000. And there's a range in between there, but that's kind of those three main categories of most of them are going to fall in those buckets.
Yep. And that brings us to transportation. How are you going to get this thing to the water?
Why does that matter if you're trying to make a decision?
Because you have to transport it.
Well, you got to figure out what works for you. Some people, they don't have a vehicle that can have a trailer, right? So that takes you right out of it. If you don't have a truck, you can't put it in the back of your truck. It means you're going on top of the car.
If you have a short bed truck, you're going to have difficulty with kayaks longer than 12 feet. Even 12-foot kayaks can be an issue. So you have to get a little hitch support, especially once you get past 12 feet. If you got a roof rack vehicle, then you got to get it up on the roof. They make fancy ones that like slide the thing down, you tip it up. It takes 0% effort to put it up on top. They're kind of expensive. So you've got things like that. And I mean, depending on the weight of the kayak, so if you went paddle,
and the length,
pedal, motor, if you've got like a 14-foot, 150-pound, the Jackson Nar, for example, 150-pound, almost dry weight, nothing in it.
Have fun putting that on top of your car versus a 10-foot sit inside you could toss up there. So there's a huge difference, and that is that's actually a deciding factor for like a lot of people that people don't think about. Plus, once you hit the motor side, you can still cart around with wheels, but I think a lot of folks are moving towards trailers. If you need to get a trailer, that's going to not double your cost, but it's
go back to budget.
Go back to budget because
now
now between the motor and the transportation alone, that's like $6,000. Like by the time you get a decent trailer and you get a decent motor with a battery and everything else, you're already at $6,000 without even buying the boat. So that's why we say transportation. It's going to dictate pedal, paddle, motor, inflatable, and it's also going to dictate a lot of your costs as well. Accessories is number 4 on the list. Arguably could be higher, but it has to be here. You cannot ignore it. So accessories for us in this situation is anything other than the kayak, the paddle, and the safety PFD. Anything else is an accessory. So there's some things that you're going to really want as a fisherman. One is going to be an anchor. I think that's the first thing that someone should get. I think it totally changes the way you fish. And I think not having an anchor on your kayak
is a mistake.
Even with a pedal like the Hobie 360, which is really versatile, I miss it when I don't have it. So I think that is one, and that could be anywhere from a couple of bucks. You can go as cheap as a rope and a dumbbell, or you can go for something like the Anchor Wizard, which is $150 without any brackets.
The power pole.
Or a power pole. Like there's a lot of options, but they all have a cost to them, and they all attach differently based on the kayak that you get. So think about where you might want to put that anchor, what type of anchor you want, and what the cost is, and again, add it to that buffer.
Next up is going to be a kayak crate generally.
That's what I was going to say.
Because you need somewhere to store your tackle. Once again, you're going to have the gamut here. You can get a milk crate, which appears on your doorstep at some point in time in your life. Otherwise, you're not a human person.
We've all got a milk crate that showed up into our lives and never left.
Where do they come from? We don't know. So anyway, so you can do a milk crate. You can go all the way to the upper end. You got like the Wilderness Systems and the Yak Attack, right? The Black Pack. Those are going to be like your more on the expensive end. Yeah, $150 to $200 maybe. Sometimes you can get them used. Of course, you can get any of the stuff we talked about today used. But yeah, you're looking at kind of that spread there, and that's how you're going to store your tackle when you're out on the water.
Or your lunch or anything else. And then
everything else that floats around your boat.
After that, I think there's some cheaper stuff, like rod holders is always going to be one that some people really like to have.
We're going to get into other variations of tool and tackle storage, and then you get to your electronics, I think, too. Do you need electronics to find fish? No. Does it help find fish?
Well, some people want them. So if you want them, you have to account for that. Now, what's included with that? One is installation. It's what everybody forgets. You buy the electronics, you think you're good. You forgot about the wiring harnesses, the way that you're actually going to mount it to your kayak, whether it goes underneath, there's an arm that sticks off the side, sometimes both. Those all are going to add like 10 to 20%, depending on your electronics, of the total cost. There's just going to be more money when you get down to wiring and then mounting equipment. So electronics is a big one to consider after everything else. But I think anchor, some sort of crate, you're probably going to want maybe some type of rod holders or cup holders, things like that. That's probably a smaller expense, but then electronics is a huge one. So on top of all the other stuff we talked about between transportation, paddle, you have to add accessories to that buffer. And then if your budget was $5,000, I hate to say this, you guys, it's not fun to talk about, but if your budget was $5,000 and you were thinking you were going to go get a monster kayak,
the best on the market.
$2,000 of that may be taken up between electronics and some of your others, and just your other accessories. So just think about that, and now you've got 3 versus 5 for your budget. So just keep that in mind as you're figuring out what to look for. The last one
is Monster. You're going to need to buy stock in purple Monster Ultras so you can wake up and fish. Shut up and fish.
Oh God, it wasn't going to be that for me.
Oh, what was your idea?
So number 5 for me was actually going to be value. Now this seems weird, but you have to look at, okay, I could buy like 2 really inexpensive kayaks, or I could buy 1 really inexpensive kayak and put like a ton of amazing accessories into it. Or you could spend a lot on your motor, save your pop cans for the next 23 years, and buy 1 kayak cart or something like that.
Do you guys remember saving pop cans to buy stuff?
100%, dude.
I did.
I remember absolutely did that.
When there was like a family reunion, I'd be like,
just
can
walk
I have
it through,
all
baby.
the cans?
Throw them in. Oh, dude, like graduation party, coming back through, that's for me. So, there are multiple ways to think about this. And I personally think that this is, after you've thought about the other things, this should be the last consideration. Okay, maybe I want the new Titan X, but you're like, well, like maybe instead of getting the new Titan X, maybe I go get the previous model, like last year's or 2 years if it's not the Titan X, or you could go get the Slayer, which is like a little bit different version of the Titan X, but still does a lot of the same things, but it's a lot less expensive. You could also consider going to a 10-foot instead of a 12-foot, so like the Old Town PDL. You get a lot of value and you shave some of the cost by just going 10.5 feet versus 12 feet. So or you could just go the Pelican route, right? You can go, I'm gonna get the big Wilderness Systems. I'm gonna go save $2,000 and get a pedal kayak for a lot less money. But I'm here to tell you, my opinion on this one, it's kind of like a house. You can't add a basement to a house. You just can't do it, right?
You could try.
There's
that lady on TikTok that's been mining.
She is mining under her house.
She got shut down, though.
It's not great.
So you're going to get shut down and probably sued by the HOA.
So it's like but there are some things you just can't add to a home, and it's the same thing with a kayak. You can't change the hull shape of the kayak. You can't build in better stability. You can't build in a lot of the stuff that comes. You just can't add quality. And so, in my opinion, try some of these kayaks out, first of all. That's my biggest recommendation. A lot of these places, so like when we wanted to test out some boats,
We called around.
A
lot of different places.
Water Dog Outfitters, they were like, hey, you can come and try all these kayaks for free. Anyone can go do this, and a lot of these large kayak dealers will let you do that now. Small ones too. So go try out the boat before, or try out the top 3 options for you. So I'm just gonna say that. Look at the different models that are out there, find the one that you think fits the bill the most, and buy that one. Even if it's past your budget and you can't get the electronics now, or you can't get the motor now, if you can handle it safely and consistently, get the best kayak you can afford, because again, there's some stuff you can't build in. Quality seat. I'm telling you right now, the quality of the seat is probably the pinnacle of one of the most important things. The second is the tracking, the length, and the weight. Like, if it's got a quality hull.
And stability.
And stability is included with that. So Old Town makes Hobie makes a very wide boat, makes a wonderful hull, but it's got some drawbacks with reliability. Old Town, everything is quality, everything is a value. You get the nice confluence of stability and length and cost. But really go test that out. Make sure it's the one for you. Buy the best kayak that you can afford, in my opinion. Buy the electronics later. Buy the kayak crate later. If you can afford that.
You can build over time like a house.
Just do it later.
And at the same time, consider go buy it used.
100%.
Just go to Facebook Marketplace.
Most of these kayaks have like maybe 50 hours on them. Like, think about 50 hours.
Especially post 2020.
That's like 20 trips for some people. Like, you can get an incredible value. But it's used, someone may have jacked it up, so you got to consider that. It's used, so maybe you got to drive 500 miles to go get it. It's used, so it could be a lemon, and it's used, so it may just have some wear and tear that you don't want to deal with. I respect that, but it is an option for you. We both bought used kayaks and been happy with them in the past. So you can do it. But all that to say, that's just my opinion. If electronics is really important to you, and if a motor is really important to you, and the only way that you can afford it is by buying a less expensive boat that's maybe doesn't have everything you want, you have to make that consideration. But you have to
find the middle ground.
You do
find the middle ground. And I mean, also consider like Hobie Pro Anglers from 2012 in papaya color. Are
that papaya color,
free.
there's like $1,000 knockoff a lot of times on some of those.
Oh, it's more than that. You can get them for $2K or less now, and you could bargain.
I'm not gonna lie, I want one.
You'd be like, let's haggle on this, baby.
I like to dicker and deal.
I love that. So you find somebody that's willing to talk and just see if you can break their firm asking price and go from there. So hopefully this list was very helpful for you guys. I know a lot of folks are like still on the bank, but they're like, I want to get into a kayak. It's just so much to consider. We agree. There's a lot to consider. And if you go about it in the right way, you can knock this out in an afternoon and just be like,
100%.
what do I want to do? Just map it out. Use the top 5 we gave you today. Get your budget down and then build off of that and just see what's going to work for you. All right, you guys, again, hopefully this was helpful for you. If it was, be sure to smash that like, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff, and hopefully we see you on one of our future live podcasts. We go live every Wednesday, 8:15 p.m. Eastern, and we'll see you there. Paul, hit the canoe. Let's go, baby.
I'm ready.